Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Black Thought. I'm your host, Dr. Hutchinson. I'm so glad to be here today. So glad to see all of you here today. And it is a blessing to be in front of you in this capacity. Let me do a few housekeeping things before I go to our distinguished guest. First of all, if you want to dialogue with the show, there's several ways to do it. We first have a Facebook page, MUTV1 Black Thought. MUTV1 Black Thought. If you go to that page, you're able to see content that's attached to this show. You're able to also see a link to our YouTube channel where we have various shows that have been posted on that channel for your perusal, some past shows, some shows that happened in the very recent past, as well as some production that's attached to what we do here at Black Thought. So we want to encourage you to go and look. Many people have already stopped by the YouTube channel. We ask you to do the same. And as you go by the Facebook page, click like. Let us know that you're watching and let us know what you think. So we're glad that you can reach out in that way. Also, if you send me an email, if you want to contact me that way, the email address is blackthought.mutv1@yahoo.com. Black Thought, the name of the show, .mutv1, Memphis' first black-owned television station, @yahoo.com. And then, of course, I am the proud pastor of First Baptist Church Lauderdale in that great hamlet of South Memphis, directly across the street from the Booker T. Washington High School, and the number there is 523-0501. But, of course, if you call the church right now, you won't get me because I'm looking at you in HD video. Keep it locked right here. And finally, if you want to get me, there's a direct line. It's 249-9995. 249-9995. Something going on, give me a quick call. Want to also mention something else, which I guess from my perspective is overwhelming and fabulous. As you know, the Tri-State Defender is hosting the Best in Black Awards that's taking place on the 28th of this month at the FedEx Forum. I want you to know that I'm honored that someone in the Memphis community, or some persons, I should say plural, recommended me to be considered for the best television media personality. Now, there's some heavy hitters in this group. There's some persons on Channel 5, Channel 13, Channel 2, and me. So I'm honored. I've been doing this about 9 months, and I want to thank all of you, maybe 10 months. And I want to thank all of you for your support. And also, since it is, let's just put it where it is, since it is a popularity contest, I want you to vote for a brother. So don't forget me. So go to bestinblack.com, and I think it's number 47, Best Television Media Personality, and you will see the name Noel Hutchinson. Go ahead and push that button and vote. But even beyond that, it's just an honor to be recognized and to be nominated. So Memphis, thank you. Well, enough of that. We have a great guest here today, and you need to see her, and we need to have dialogue with her. I am so honored that we have County Commissioner Henri Brooks with us. What a great blessing and honor to have you on the set.
Thank you. It's really great to be on.
Yes, we've tried countless times. It has nothing to do with her willingness, but you know, it seems like that proverbial Murphy's Law has been in effect. Absolutely. Even this week. So I'm glad you're here.
Almost. Murphy's Law, almost.
Yeah, we're going to pray Murphy away. But anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm glad you're here for several reasons. First of all, it's good to have elected officials on when they can enlighten the community on what's going on.
That's right.
And also, we want to give kudos to you. I did it in your absence, but I want to do it personally, and I've said it to you outside of the airwaves, that Memphis owes a great debt of gratitude to you in terms of your work concerning the juvenile court. And we want to thank you. And when others weren't jumping up and down about it, you were jumping up and down about it. And it came to fruition. And we want you to know we appreciate what you did.
Thank you very much. I'm humble, honored, and that you said it. Quite frankly, it's a passion that I have, and I've had. A lot of people don't know this, but I am a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm a former teacher, and a former probation counselor for troubled children. So children are my passion. And as you know, I spent 14 years in the state legislature, and there I sponsored a number of bills dealing with youth, children, women, children, and families. And one of the pieces of legislation I sponsored dealt with children and gun safety. And we all know how important that is. And that was way back in the 90s. Unfortunately, some of my colleagues didn't see the wisdom of passing it at the time, but now we see how important that we have some kind of legislation governing children and gun safety. We didn't stop there. We didn't let that deter us. We still were able to pass legislation dealing with trigger laws. So that was a small step, but it was a step toward children and gun safety. As I said, I have a passion for children. I do, and I worked at juvenile court for 11 years. 11 years, and I learned every aspect of the court, from paternity testing all the way to docket coordination, which included probation counseling, income assignment, all of those other areas in between at juvenile court.
So in other words, when you took on the task of trying to get juvenile court right, you weren't looking for a cause. You had already been through that system.
Absolutely.
You had an affinity for children.
Absolutely.
You already knew the lay of the land when you started. But now let's go to the historical perspective of this. When did you start to notice what was happening in juvenile court, and when did you first start speaking out?
Well, actually, it started while I was employed there. While I was employed there, and I'm pretty sure that they have a file on me, they probably have several files, personnel files, because I would speak up about, those kinds of things that, I didn't feel right about. Those kinds of things that didn't look right to me. At the time, I didn't know the federal standards and what the federal laws said, but I just had this innate feeling that we were not doing things right, especially when children went to court. Now, I knew from watching TV and just common sense that people should have a lawyer, and if adults should have a lawyer in court, and I heard everybody say that, then children need one. And oftentimes, while I was employed there, I saw children in court without attorneys, and I saw the judge asking them, well, now tell me what happened. And I said, well, that's not right. You can't ask a child to incriminate themselves, and that's not the word I used at the time, but tell off on themselves. Or children are so intimidated by the judge sitting up there in his black robe, and in that courtroom, they'll say anything just to get out of the courtroom, thinking they'll get out of the courtroom, but they're not getting out of the courtroom. They're putting themselves in further jeopardy and further at risk. So it started there. And this was
back around the 80s or so?
Actually, I started there in 76. And then around, I guess, the early 80s, that's when I, started asking questions, raising issues, and that's when they started to move with me from department to department to department. But I'm glad they did, because that helped me to learn something about every department of juvenile court. I know something about the whole place. I mean, I actually know how it's supposed to operate. So, actually, my concern about children in juvenile court began while I was employed there. And I did resign. I resigned in 1987 to become the governor's regional director on consumer affairs, which was a step up for me, which eventually led to political office. But I kept that passion for children and families. I still have it.
And so when did you file the paperwork and push it forward so that the Department of Justice would get involved?
Well, I took that complaint. I took it to Washington, D.C. in 2007. And I'll tell you why. 2007, I knew that if I had tried to go through the normal protocol here, go through the Western District and then send it via whatever to the Justice Department, it wouldn't make it. it would not get an audience. So I was determined that this would get an audience. You know, and let me just tell you this, Pastor. I could not get an attorney. I could not find one attorney that would take this as a lawsuit, number one, when I first started in 2007. And then I couldn't find anyone, not an attorney, that would step out front and help me to put the thing together. So what I did was, we held town hall meetings, gathered information from, you know, all over the citywide, and had people to come in and talk about their experience at juvenile court. And a number of children talked about what happened to them, and there are some horror stories. And it shows the conditions at juvenile court, and it shows the violation of constitutional rights. But let me just skip to that, the part you asked about. I took that complaint, which was like 2 big binders, this is it. I took it to Washington, D.C. myself. And I had an appointment. I had an audience with representatives of the Justice Department who represented various divisions, including Civil Rights Division, Youth Division, Juvenile Delinquency, da-da-da-da. So I ended up before about 9 people sitting at the table at the Justice Department, and they were overwhelmed because when I came in, put in my little my little suitcase with my complaint in it. Because when I said I had a complaint, they expected me to pull out a couple sheets of paper.
Well, not only that, they probably said, well, this is going to be perfunctory. We're just going to hear her. It's probably a little minor complaint, and we'll move on. And then when you brought the boxes of evidence, they said, whoa, wait a minute. Wait. And then when you started talking, it probably blew their minds.
I had, you know, the complaint. I had the complaint, and behind the complaint, I had the exhibits. I had written testimonies, oral testimonies that had been reduced to writing, and everything was dated and signed and what have you from people who had these experiences. And then I articulated some, you know, this sort of a backdrop on the juvenile court itself. A lot of people don't know that, and a lot of people listening out here or watching here don't know. You need to find out the backdrop of juvenile court. It didn't just get this way.
Oh, it's been like that.
It's been this way or worse for decades. You know, it started way back. Oh my goodness. I'm thinking it Kenneth Turner, but no, it goes back to Elizabeth McCain, who was selling babies. You know, they made a movie about that. Selling babies, you know, they send children to the Baptist Children's Home. They take the children from the parents, usually black women who didn't have economic means, put them in the Baptist Children's Home, and white children as well, and they sell them on the West Coast.
Wow.
And Elizabeth McCain resigned and amid that controversy, and she resigned to avoid, you know, any other kind of punishment, and that's when Kenneth Turner was appointed, and then he ran.
And then it was maybe not quite baby selling, but more of the same.
Right. The baby selling, they sort of, you know.
Yeah, they squashed that.
We don't know anything more about that. Yeah. But the other thing that started was, of course, the unfair treatment. You know, it's always been disproportionate minority confinement over there.
Well, let me put a pin right there for a minute, for 2 reasons. First of all, I think that our people sometimes, when there's a tough issue, we want to jump on the glamour issue. For example, and I'm not casting aspersions, so y'all hearing this, don't think that I'm losing my mind, but it was relatively easy to jump on the Gina 6 situation. Matter of fact, I went to the protest, and the protest was nothing like the ones you had in the 60s. You had brothers selling barbecue down in Gina.
Right.
I have pictures of it. So it had, and the police were giving directions and being cordial. That was nothing like what you saw in the 60s in these areas. So it was more like an outing than a protest. But when you have situations such as this, we don't get behind them, because now you've been noticing this for roughly, you said 40 years. Really, when you start from when you started working there till now, And I heard drips and drabs when I came to the city about it, but and I heard you in passing talk about it, but you could never get traction until you had to go and take this to DC yourself. That's the first thing.
Physically take it to DC, otherwise it would not have seen the light of day.
But now, let me tag something to this. And I've heard this from persons on both sides of this thing. I've heard this from persons who live out in Germantown. And I've heard this from people who are in my neighborhood and around my church. You have juvenile delinquents everywhere. Let me paint the picture like that.
Yeah, okay.
But if you're a juvenile delinquent up until recently out in Germantown, you never made it a lot of times to the system down at 201 Pop or the juvenile court. You didn't make it there.
616 Adams.
Yeah, you didn't make it to juvenile court. Let me fix that. What they would do with you is keep you out in Germantown, call your folks, they'd have a little conference, you'd go home. I've heard this from persons who even went through it.
It's an actual fact.
But now, if you live in Raleigh, which is almost the same distance, or really in certain parts of Raleigh is the same distance to Adams, they take your butt down to juvenile court.
Absolutely.
See, so there was a disparity.
Great disparity.
That was going on all this time. And I mean, it was an open secret. It wasn't like people didn't know.
Right.
But it was going on consistently. And so you would have somebody, let's say from Foot Homes, that was guilty of an infraction that may have been less than the young man out in Germantown, but because they were poor and because they had the wrong pigment, they'd wind up in Adams quick. And then you just described the fact that they didn't have legal representation in a lot of cases. They'd wind up getting a record, getting things on their record. And what you have to understand, that once you get that stamp on you, you are part of the prison industrial complex.
That's it. That is so important. I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of our children were picked up in South Memphis and Lower Fraser and Lower Raleigh areas, out of the high income areas, and they were taken straight to juvenile court. Now, this is based on what an officer could have been told. They may have said, well, I think it was Noel Hutchison that was over there, stealing out of the store, because, he sort of steals. He used to steal. Police go pick him up, take him to juvenile court, put him in detention. Now, that child could be totally innocent, in the wrong place at the wrong time. A lot of that has happened, but you have to realize that when you bring a child to juvenile court, it starts the record.
Exactly.
It starts the number of times that you go, then you start to get labeled. You begin to get a juvenile delinquency tag stuck to you. You get 3 of those, and then you put you on probation. Next thing they want to know, they'll do a minor infraction. They want to transfer you to adult court and try you as an adult. Got a letter yesterday. Now I won't go through the whole thing because I hadn't talked to her about it, but child never has committed anything that was a violent act, but he has a lot of trauma, a lot of dysfunction, psychosocial issues. Mother had to leave him for some reason, we don't know why, and he has never been able to process that in his mind, so it manifested itself by him acted out behavior. And the letter came from a cousin who was asking for help, and the only help she wanted was to, instead of putting him over there with hardened criminals, would you give him a chance and put him in some program that would help him mentally, give him some, psychosocial help that he might need, assess what it is and give it to him.
See, you just hit on something key, because in some of our neighborhoods, and I mean, when I even look at my life when I was growing up, I knew people that were on the right side of the law. I knew people that were on the wrong side of the law. Right. So if you grow up in certain places, you're going to know people that are up to no good. I remember one thing steeped in my mind. I was getting ready to get on the subway to go back to college. ran into a guy, we grew up 4 blocks from one another, hung out with each other, even did some things we shouldn't have done together, all right? I'm going to college. He's going as parole officer on the way to jail.
Okay.
Same neighborhood, getting on the same train.
Absolutely.
All right, going 2 separate ways. So now, should I be tagged because I know him, and then, as we say, the popo come to my house, locking me up because they said I hang out with miscreants and drug dealers?
Right.
I can walk down the street in some neighborhoods and look, I know some nefarious folk now, and I'm a pastor. You understand but when you move around certain places, that's just a part of what happened.
Well, now Jesus knew something too. Now he
I know
hung
that,
out with something.
Yeah, if you're gonna be like Jesus, you're gonna know something. I know some of you, Saditic, lemon juice Christians may not understand that. But if you're going to be like Jesus,
that's right.
You're going to know Pogo and Nuck in them. You're going to know them, and they're going to know you.
Junebug.
That's it. But anyway, we digress.
I know. Okay.
Let's take a break here, because now we kind of have the history. We know that at the end of 2012, the Department of Justice came with a ruling that talked about all of these practices and that they weren't fair and that they needed to be fixed. So what we want to do is take a break now, and when we come back, we want to talk about what happened and what's happening right now. You're watching Black Thought, and I'm your host, Dr. Hutchinson.